All right, we're live, buddy. What's going
All
on, brother?
right. What's going on? I'm dreading this weekend because it's going to be 100. It's going to be 109 degrees.
Oh, I thought you were referring to the Memorial Day. What do you call that? PTSD from what resulted from the last Memorial Day in terms of shutdowns. But yeah, it's going to be really, really hot, man.
So last weekend, Melina and I went to Morro Bay, which is up the coast, and it was sweater weather. I mean, it was beautiful. It was like, in the 50s and the 60s. And, I think first of all, I mean, the temperature was amazing. It's super cool after a few months of really hot weather. And I do have to say, I don't think this summer has been unbearable. It's been it's been okay, except for a few like short periods of super high temperatures. But it's so nice to be able to kind of pretend like it's fall and you get out of town and you're wearing a long sleeve shirt, and long pants, and you're like, this is great. And then to come back, and I was so excited about working on a bunch of projects, in the yard. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we've got a 3-day weekend. I'm like all fired up. It's going to be 109 degrees on Saturday and Sunday. And then it drops down to a cool 97 on Monday. So I'm not looking forward to that. But I'll say something about going away to Morro Bay. And you and I have talked about this. Last 6 months have been for everybody, especially those of us who have businesses and those of us who have been shut down. We've been closed now for 5 months. We were allowed to open for 1 month. And
which
even though
crazy when you think about it,
it's absolutely nuts. But it's not like we're not working. It's not like, oh, well, you're shut down, so you're on vacation. We're not on vacation. We're running a fully operational business, and there's been a significant. I think we all need to acknowledge that there's been a significant amount of stress, emotional stress, mental, psychological stress, financial fear, all of that stuff, and we haven't taken any time off.
Right.
And it seems like we're kind of reluctant to do it, right? Because it's like, well, wait a minute, we are working, but there's this almost like, well, we're not really working. Do we deserve to take time off? We are working. We're working as much as we ever do, but
more.
I don't know when you've taken a vacation. When's the last time you took a week off?
It was unfortunately a year ago, 2 weeks ago, because and the only reason I know that is because it came up on my Facebook memories, and I was like, oh my God, that was the last time I went on vacation, and that was a long time ago. And listen, we were planning on going on a vacation in late July, early August, when we had to cancel that. So
weren't you going to go to Kauai?
We were going to go to Kauai, and it was going to be a big trip.
I mean, the fact that you had to miss out on that's awful.
No, I know. I was just talking to somebody about that. They're still quarantining people. They haven't let up on that. So you can't even go to Hawaii if you want to right now, unless you were planning on staying there for a month. And listen, we can't even think about taking off a couple of days, let alone, could you imagine taking off a month right now in the middle of all this? Like, who can do that?
Psychologically, no. I mean, it'd probably be the best thing for us mentally.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But there's no way,
especially coming up with the Kickstart. No.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a while. This weekend,
just taking a few days off. I took Friday off. We left early Friday. We drove up Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We drove back on Monday morning. And listen, I tried as hard as I could to stay away from email and all that stuff. I did a very, very little amount, but it's important, man. I mean, it matters. I felt so much better coming back from that. So anyway, that's not even about what we're talking about today, but You're asking me how I was.
I actually do want to talk to you about that just a little bit more, because what's funny about that is I was just having a conversation probably like a week and a half or 2 weeks ago with my buddy Pat, and what we were talking about, somehow we got on the topic of health and what it is to be healthy right now, and he's getting back into working out and stuff like that. He just started up school. He's a school teacher down in San Diego, and they're going through enormous amounts of stress and stuff like that, and how much better he feels. And for some reason we got on the topic of how 10, 15 years ago, if you were to ask me what are the things that you do in order to be healthy on a day-to-day basis, it would be around protein shakes and working out. And he asked me the question, and I noticed in the way I answered it that it was completely night and day from what I would have answered 10, 15 years ago. And it was around the fact that I cut off work and I spend more time with having fun, and I'm into this PlayStation game right now. So I'm playing video games at 40 years old, which is, but it's like I escape, and it's a problem solving game and stuff like that. And I started listing out all these things that I do that had nothing, I didn't even mention a workout, had nothing to do with that. So I found it interesting because I caught myself in the middle of the conversation kind of going, wow, how much has my perception of what living a healthy lifestyle and the important aspects and components of that need to be in order for me to feel like I'm healthy. And especially this year, it's around having fun. It's around connecting with people and being in the moment and just having a conversation with people and making time and space for that. And listen, it is harder to do than, at least for me, I can speak for myself, harder to create that space to be able to do those things and connect with people and have fun and do the things that are necessary for me to do those things, which translates into my perception of strength being completely different than it was before, because now I'm just working out a different muscle group, and my muscle group is around forcing the other things out of my life so that they don't start to overflow into my time of having fun. It's almost identical to the same practices that I had back in the day when somebody invited me out to lunch or to the bar and I said, no, I got to go to jiu-jitsu. Oh no, I got to go train or do a workout. It's the same, if you can imagine, it's the same kind of discipline applied completely different for different activities that still fall into the realm of what do you do to stay healthy on a daily basis. I found that completely interesting. I had like one of those aha moments 2 weeks ago in the middle of that conversation, because I was like, wow, if my perception in as a coach in the fitness industry has changed as far as what the components of health are, and they've changed over the last 15, 20 years, what are people's perception of being healthy? Are they binary in terms of, if I'm not involved in a fitness program, then I'm not a healthy person? Or
so my question for you,
foods, am I not a healthy person?
My question would be, do you feel like that realization, do you feel like the change in your outlook pertaining to health is the result of just how you've matured as a human being, how you've grown, you've gotten older, or do you feel like it's because of the emerging science that's come out that's talking more about these different facets of health, or do you feel like it's a combination of the two, or none of that?
Well, listen, let me rephrase that. I feel like my maturity in this journey, not necessarily, let's not put a biological age to it, but my time spent in my journey to really understand what it is to be healthy has brought me to one conclusion. And I think we've discovered this in business too as well. It's not one thing. It's not one thing. It's a lot of things working all in the same direction. I've just realized at this point that when it comes to my own health, that even though I knew that in business, and I think we've said this a dozen times, and when you were doing your consulting and stuff like that, everybody, that was the number one question people ask you: what's the one thing that made you so successful? And it's never one thing. It's like 1,000 things. It's 1,000 things in business. But I was never able to translate that to my health. I think maturity has now made me realize that I've been missing components into my perception of what I thought was health, and now I'm just bringing everything together. Right. So I'm not overly emphasizing workouts. Now, listen, could some of that been through education? Absolutely. Can some of that been through maturity? Absolutely. Can some of that have been forced upon me from sports injuries, having me to put myself in a position where I had to take a step back from my workouts and had to focus more on my nutrition in order to remain healthy? Absolutely. I think it's all of that. And now even more recently, has COVID changed my perception? This pandemic, staying at home, having more times with my family and being able to recognize simple walks and times in the backyard or front yard or wherever you go to play and stuff like that and act like a child. Have those experiences helped me to come to this conclusion? Absolutely. So I don't think it's, again, I think I'm at a point in my life where I'm saying once again, it's not one thing here. It's not one thing. It's a lot of different things. I think what I've done is I've just ignored the other components to health, which is fun and connecting.
So what I hear you saying is it's kind of a synthesis of different things and different circumstances contributing to an overall awareness. And then also what it sounds like is you've developed a greater degree of awareness and mindfulness about, and I'm not saying mindfulness in the meditative context, but really just being mindful of what's occurring in your world so that you have the opportunity to kind of synthesize all these things together.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, what I've realized over time is everything is kind of like a car. It's like a car. It's like when somebody says, what's the most important thing to focus on when it comes to fitness? Or what's the most important thing to focus on when it comes to business? Well, I mean, what's the most important thing to focus on in your car? Like keeping the engine strong? Or is it the transmission? Or is it the electrical system? Is it the braking system? Is it heating and cooling? I mean, there are all these different components that have to be able to work together in a healthy way in order for that car to run, right? But if you spend all of your time just paying attention to the motor, so that would be the equivalent of exercise, right? Yeah. All you're doing is you're feeding the motor, which is exercise when in the context of health, or the motor would be like sales in the context of business, right? But you're not paying attention to all these other parts of the car, and you're allowing them to disintegrate and degrade. The car's still going to break down. So really, if you want to have a well-functioning vehicle, you have to pay attention to maintaining all of these different systems of the car, which are integrated, so that the car operates well. The same thing goes with health. These different components and different facets of your health, each one has to be paid attention to. Each one needs to be cultivated in order for there to be overall well-being. If you just work out and you don't do anything else, that's great. I mean, that's a start, but it's not comprehensive, and the vehicle will still break down. Same with your business. If it's all sales and you're not focusing on the other aspects of your business, the business is going to fail. Right. So it's an interesting, I think that's the kind of thing that you realize over time and experience. And I think probably through just screwing up like a million times and paying attention to the wrong things over and over, but being mindful of the value of failure so that you can figure out, okay, why did I fall on my face here? That in and of itself isn't a big deal. The question is, why did it happen? And how do I keep from falling on my face for the same reason again in the future? Because I know I'm going to fall on my face for a different reason. So it's interesting. I think that is an interesting kind of process of growing older and maturing, is just having so many more experiences, that just the volume of experience teaches you these lessons, that everything's integrated, everything's synthesized, and it's never one thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Which is a great segue to what we want to talk about today, actually.
Kick it off.
All right. So, well, listen, how do we best do this so that we understand what we're going through? I mean, like, so that we give the audience the biggest picture. What we're basically talking, or what I wanted to talk about, was influence from. Let me bring up, what's the name of the doctor? He's a.
You know, I don't. Let me see if I can.
A lot of popularity lately. I'll bring it up on my phone real quick. Hold on a second. He's gaining a lot of popularity. It's Z-Dog MD. Is his. Dr. Z is what he calls himself. And he's gaining a lot of popularity on YouTube and Facebook right now for various reasons. But he had this video that caught my eye that really kind of goes into what we're talking about right now, which is, he posed a question: are we overly cautious in how we approach this whole pandemic, or are we underly cautious? Are we underestimating the severity of this disease? And it's funny because that's what's happening right now, right? And what he talks about in this scenarios is, on one side you have, and this is where he kind of interjects politics. And if you've watched a lot of his other videos, his main premise is, like most medical doctors, I hope, are taking, this is about science. This is not a political thing. And so much because of the climate of our nation, so many people have tried to interject politics into this, that we are ignoring the basic fundamental principles of science because of that. And we're missing a huge boat. And this is one of the things that are contributing to why the United States is struggling so much with grasping this thing, is because we've injected politics in the face of science. And what he talks about is, he gives reference to why politics is being interjected into this. And it's because Democrats are overestimating, or have the tendency through polls, this is not my opinion whatsoever, through polls, that Democrats have a tendency to overestimate the severity of the virus, to the extent where everything needs to be shut down. Social economic classes are starting to basically collapse on itself. And the economy is being affected, and people's lives and mental health are being affected as a result. On the other side, Republicans have a tendency to underestimate the severity of it, to the extent of, this is a hoax, masks don't work, this is all bullshit, it's no bigger than a cold, yada, 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 you'll be fine, you have more likely of a chance of, getting run over by a car than having contracted COVID-19 and dying from it. Now, total polar opposite views. And in this video, he talks about how under the age of 24, the estimated through polls is that I think it's anywhere between 6 or 9%. Is 6 or 9%? Basically,
what it was 8%. I want to say that it was like 8%. Yeah,
8% of people under the age of 24 will end up dying of COVID-19, resulting in about 11,000 deaths. Right. And up to date, at the time he shot this video, the number is closer to 248, which means that getting in a car and dying from a car accident is 46 times more likely to happen than you dying of COVID-19 if you're under the age of 24.
I have a question for you, real quick.
Now,
let me ask a question real quick.
I haven't fact checked any of this.
Yeah, I know, me neither. Can you actually play that video?
You know what? I can probably do so right now. Let's try that. Hold on, wait a second. Let me bring it up first. But he brings up some really interesting points. The other point he was bringing up was the fact that, well, let me just play the video. It's actually right here. Let me bring it up real quick. I've got about 47 tabs on my computer, so everybody just bear with me. Hold on.
It's Dr. Z. Hey, are we too cautious or too careless?
All right, hold on a second. Let's bring up that screen. And share that. There we go. You see it?
I do.
When it comes to coronavirus? Well, the answer is both, because Americans are extraordinarily bad at understanding risk. And this is of crucial importance, because if we overestimate the risk of coronavirus, we destroy the economy and our social fabric. If we underestimate the risk of coronavirus, we lose lives. Well, it turns out young people, people 24 and under, overestimate their risk by an inordinate amount. So they assume that 8% of these young people get really sick and die with coronavirus, which something like, I think is like 11,000 deaths should happen in 24 and under, based on survey results of what young people believe. Well, it turns out 258 Americans under the age of 24 have died of coronavirus. That makes automobile accidents 36 times more deadly for people 24 and under. Your likelihood of dying of coronavirus if you're under the age of 24 and don't have a ton of medical problems is like infinitesimally small. And yet we overestimate it. Why is that bad? Because these are the same young people who frequent businesses, who use restaurants, who go out in public. And the truth is, if you wear a mask and you do those things and you take reasonable precautions, you're pretty dang safe. There was the salon workers in Missouri, both of whom were infected with COVID. They wore masks. Their clients wore masks, about 130 odd clients. Not a single person got sick from them. So it's actually, you can do things in the world without getting COVID. So risk misadjustment number one. Now, what about old people? So the elderly seem to think they're not at high risk for this by a factor of 2. They underestimate how deadly it is. It turns out COVID-19 is 14 times more deadly for elderly people than automobile accidents. That's a big, big difference. So what does that mean for the world? Well, it means that protect people at risk. Nursing homes, people who are at high risk should take extra precautions, maybe staying home if they don't have to go out and shop, definitely wear masks, wash hands, all the other things, social distance. Be careful around young people who can be asymptomatic spreaders. So you don't want young people to underestimate their risk so much that they're out behaving like, punks and asymptomatically spreading it, but some balance where you're taking reasonable precautions. Now, what does politics have to do all this? Well, it turns out Democrats are much more likely to overstate and catastrophize the risk to young people, regardless of where they live. Republicans are more likely to understate and actually resist public health authorities asking for masks and social distancing and things like that. Now, it turns out it's probably more the case that these two groups are triggering each other than they are actually responding to the science and the actual risk. So here's the call to action. Let's have a nuanced discussion, good luck with that in America, about risk and benefit. Open up the economy, get the schools opened up again, take pretty much universal masking where you can't social distance, and just do the right thing, and we'll get through this thing. And if we get beyond the politics and all the misunderstanding, we will do much, much better simply by understanding risk. Not too careless, not too cautious, just right. It's like a Goldilocks thing. All right, guys, I love you.
All right. So, pretty fascinating video, right? How many times in life have you experienced something, or your experience, especially I think with a lot of things in the United States, where you start saying to people, do things in moderation?
I think it's very common.
Find the middle ground. I mean, how many lessons in life have we learned? I think that what my big takeaway from this video was, man, if we can just find the middle ground, which is based in science, wear a mask, social distance, good hygiene, we can all go back to work. I read to the way things were. That's it.
I watched this video when you sent it to me this morning, and it brought to mind something that I've been dealing with for the last few weeks in particular, because it's gotten really, the conversation, the narrative has gotten really, really ugly and really contentious politically. And Facebook, it's a mistake. I know I shouldn't take the bait, but sometimes I do. And I'm talking about conversations that are taking place on social media, which is never really the right place to have a conversation. Nevertheless, it's the conversations that are taking place on social media between people that I grew up with, people that I graduated high school with, a large group of people that I know. We're all in our late 40s, early 50s. We've known each other 35 years. Like there's a closeness to the community of people that I grew up in. We know each other. But there are people who are very friendly with each other. This whole kind of collection, this community of people, we all went to keg parties. We all went to keg parties. And you've got one attacking the other and another attacking the other. And what I was noticing, especially in the last week, having engaged in a few of these conversations, is that one of the problems is politically right now, and this relates to what we're talking about, is that there's no recognition that maybe the other side has something of value to say. Really, people are just taking these positions of, my side's got its shit together. Your side doesn't know what the hell it's doing. Your side is ruining the country. And that's the game of tennis that's going back and forth. It's like, and it's on both sides. And I jumped into a conversation with somebody that I know well, grew up with, went to high school with, have a lot of respect for as a person. And this person had said something about their particular side, political side, and just how wrong the other side is, which happens to be the side that I align with politically. And I just said, hey, listen, let's be careful about confirmation bias. And let's recognize that neither side has a monopoly on dishonor. Like we both have problems. And if we can at least begin to acknowledge that, then that opens up the space for a conversation. But there's none of that. I got shot down by multiple people basically telling me all the reasons why I didn't have any basis for, my side didn't have any legitimacy. So what he said, I found really interesting about the way that the political parties respond, I think is so accurate. And listen, I'm just going to come out and say I vote Democrat. I have voted both Democrat and Republican, but I tend to vote Democrat. So when he said that Democrats overstate the risk and catastrophize, he's right. He is right. And that's my team. And I can tell you, my team's freaking out. They're a little more scared maybe than they need to be. But then the other side, the Republicans, understate the risk and resist public health policy. That's absolutely true too. And he was saying that they trigger each other. And that is absolutely true. It's almost like whatever one side says, the other side is going to take the antithetical stance, no matter what, just to be oppositional. So there's a breakdown in critical thinking.
You know what's crazy about that is you can take any other scenario that happens in your life and describe it. And I'm going to use children for that matter. And nobody wins. Nobody ever wins. But yet when it comes to politics, we're convinced that each side thinks that there's a winning situation here. We're all losing here. We're all losing.
We're all losing. And not only that, each side believes the other side is trying to ruin the country. Like that's the startling thing. It's like, no, the Republicans, they're trying to ruin this country, or the Democrats are, who the fuck wants to ruin the country? Nobody wants to do that. Your ideas may inadvertently damage social fabric or the economy or the political, climate or whatever. But everybody does what they do because they believe it to be right. Nobody is like Dr. Evil, going, I'm going to go out and I'm going to create all this havoc, and laughing maniacally. Nobody does that. Even the people that we would think are absolutely out of their minds, insane, no logic, and destructive, horrific people, they're not doing it to be horrific and destructive. They truly believe that they're that their position is the best. So that's where it becomes really tough, is that nobody's really trying to do anything to damage the country. Everybody believes, it's just that we're so far apart with our ideology. But yeah, with regard to the coronavirus thing, I do want to comment on a couple things though, and that is that I do think that there is an over statement, you know, and what am I looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? We are definitely being more cautious, overly cautious, and we're also being under cautious at the same time. Like, it is true, and
I think that's the difficult thing for people to understand, is that you can have two opposing views or actions or events exist in the same space
simultaneously.
I think that's the difficult part that people are struggling with, is
it's not an either or thing. Like, it can be an and thing. So
we can relate that to fitness, not to steer you off, but fitness, it has always been treated that way. What's better, cardio or strength, right? What's better, Pilates or yoga or cardio bar? What's better, HIIT training? Or, you know, there's this like notion that there's this binary choice when it comes to having a positive outlook or getting what you want out of life. And there's not, you know, and that
the answer is always yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
The answer is always yes. Which is better, Pilates or strength training? Yes.
Yeah.
You know, that's always the answer. And you're absolutely right, because we operate in an industry, in a one true God industry, where, you know, people, trainers or studios grab onto this concept, and then it becomes religious dogma to them, you know, where it's like, my way's right, your way's wrong. Strength training is the best way to stay in shape. No, running is. And it's like, you know, you're both wrong. They're both good. You know, they're both beneficial. So when I'm taking a look at like this under 24, this risk of death, I think it's really important to take a look at that. Is we're scared to death, but the reality is that 250 kids under the age of 24, young people under the age of 24, have died in the country, and that's tragic. But our fear of the loss, the catastrophic 11,000 people dying, is obviously off the mark. But I think, and so yes, it's easy to just say, well, you know, we're overestimating the risk of that, and therefore we should somehow adjust the way that we're doing things to allow more exposure. Yeah, because here's the problem with that. There's still long-term ramifications. Like, death is not the only issue here. You don't have to die from COVID in order for it to be a big deal. You and I have a good friend who's missing most of both hands because of COVID, and he's been a champion through the whole thing, and he's going to roll with it, and he's going to change his, you know, adjust the way that he does things in life, and he's going to come out on top, because that's the way that Greg is. But that is a huge life-changing event. So we got to be careful too that it's not binary, death or living. Like, those aren't the only two things. There are so many things in between. I have to admit that I haven't done a lot of deep research into this, but I know that I've read somewhat about there being lung scans that are done of young people, and there are weird changes in those lung scans, even once they've gotten over COVID and they're no longer symptomatic. Yeah. And that's troublesome.
There's a term now called long hauler. They're calling it long haulers, where it's just like this long, prolonged, you know, symptoms that people are experiencing that we are cataloging as we go.
Because it's a novel virus, and we're just learning as we go along. The same thing for brain scans. I know that they've noticed irregularities in brain scans that are potentially long-term. Something that I just came across coincidentally right before we began the phone call, so I haven't had a chance to research this, but I saw this was interesting, is that somebody from I think Penn State University said 30 to 35% of Big Ten athletes with COVID-19 developed myocarditis. So 30 to 35% of those developed an inflammation of the heart. So it's not as cut and dry. And those, if they're Big Ten athletes, they're going to be under the age of 24, most likely. There might be a couple that are over. So it's not as cut and dry as 250 people have died, because there are a whole bunch of other young people under the age of 24 that are still potentially suffering long-term ramifications for that. So
let me add to that. Of those people, let's take the 24 and under crowd. How many of those people have gone on to infect the over 65 crowd that has contributed to those deaths?
And the over 65 crowd are overconfident that they're not going to get it.
Right.
I've been here for so long. I'm like a redwood. You're not going to take me down.
Yeah.
I got news for you. There were some 1,000-year-old redwoods that burnt down in Northern California recently. You can get taken down. You're absolutely right. So the other thing is, just because the under 24-year-olds aren't dying, they may be, putting themselves in the position of having long-term health consequences from this, infecting people who are at risk. And the other thing is, if we suddenly say, hey, it's not dangerous to young people, how likely are they to observe safety protocols? They're less likely to begin with, I think, as far as wearing masks and social distancing. I mean, listen, we saw what happened over the 3-day holidays. The kids went out, they had keggers, they got hammered, they took their masks off, and we had a spike in numbers. So it's not as cut and dry as we're being overly cautious with the 24-year-olds. We can loosen things up and allow them to contribute to the economy. I think that's true, but it's not quite as simple as, we worried too much, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
Don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it.
Listen, I think we've always struggled as a society with moderation. I mean, like, come on, the United States, we do things big, we do things great, we do things,
because it's my right.
We came up with
my right,
for Christ's sakes.
Right. Right.
It's like,
we have the Constitution. The Constitution somehow protects you from everything. It's it excuses all behavior. I have yet to see, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I have yet to see a portion of the Constitution that addresses not having to wear masks and being able to just ignore public health policy. And yet people are saying, well, it's my constitutional right. What right exactly are we talking about? Because I'm pretty sure the framers didn't build a piece in about face masks, and I'm not aware of any part of it that deals with that. But you're right, we do things big. We don't do things halfway, right? So it's like, it's either all masks or nobody's wearing masks, right?
Right.
And I'll tell you that I know people who have driven across the country recently, and they have said entire states aren't wearing masks. And they look at me like I'm a fool when I'm wearing masks. One of my friends was in Georgia working, and when he wore a mask into supermarkets, the checkers and the employees would say, oh, honey, you don't need to wear a mask in here. They would actively encourage him to take it off.
Why does it bother other people?
I don't know. That's the thing. It's like, I'm not asking. Where does it say on my mask? It would ask me about my mask.
If I can take it off, please.
But I mean, it really is an all or nothing thing, I think, in a lot of different places. And so you're absolutely right about that. What about now? Let's talk about the older population, the redwoods. Right? Yeah. So it's like they think that they underestimate their risk, which is shocking to me. Although I will say that by and large, everybody in the older population that I personally know is very, very concerned with it. So I think that the people that we're talking about are living in the places that my friends drove through recently.
Exactly.
But
listen, what's funny about that is you almost kind of go for the under 24 crowd. You go, yeah, that makes sense. With the over 65, that doesn't make sense to me.
Doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense at all. I really think it's a redwood syndrome. It's like, it's like look, I'm 65. That means that I've lived through Vietnam, Korea, Nixon. I've lived through the Cold War,
Yeah.
9/11.
Desert Storm.
Right, exactly. And it's like,
and even that stupid Y2K Generation X.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And it's like, okay, but this is a novel virus. Did you live through the 1919, was it 1919 or 1918 pandemic?
1918.
Yeah. Did you live through that? No? Then shut up, because you have no idea what you're talking about. But it's interesting because then the elderly people are 14 times it's 14 times more deadly than a car accident for people who are in the older population. And so it is, so where do we balance this out? So how do we begin to find that Goldilocks spot? Let's talk like brass tacks. Let's talk about what matters to you and to me when it comes to our business. We've been shut down now for 5 out of the last 6 months. And just to be totally honest, that is $60-some thousand in rent.
Yeah,
60-some thousand in rent that we were not able to use. That we are not able to use. How's that survivable? So then we take a look at our business and we say, and I've been very supportive of the government as far as like Newsom and Garcetti trying to protect the public. I'm like, this is a tough job. You've got to balance public health, politics, the economy. I don't want that job. I don't think there's any right way to do this. So I've been very, very strongly supportive. I'm starting to get impatient. I'm starting to get impatient now because I'm feeling like the way that we have our gym set up, each person has 80 square feet. Each person has their own equipment. Everybody's wearing a mask. We take temperature checks when people come in. Everybody has their own PPE station where they can clean. We have filtration systems, air filtration systems. How are we not as safe as the supermarket? How are we not as safe as other businesses that are being able to open? Now, I understand the perception of gyms. LA Fitness, I would never go into a Crunch. I would never go into an LA Fitness because it's not a controllable environment.
Right.
Well, when we take a look at our business,
it
is a controllable.
I don't know that you can go into movie theaters because it's not a controlled environment, right? Unless you minimize, like you can only put people every 2 rows or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's what they do is they would block off seats and stuff. And but the transmission rate based upon data that I've seen for fitness facilities, and they don't have a lot, but the data that I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen it too, is infinitesimal. There's a less than a 1% transmission rate or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Plus,
where do we like
movie theater with a mask personally?
What's that?
I wouldn't want to sit in a movie theater with a mask on.
I wouldn't either, and I wouldn't trust other people to do it in the dark when nobody's listening.
Yeah.
But like, is a movie theater? I feel like salons are getting the short end of the stick. Like, I don't think it's a one-to-one interaction. They're close, but they're both wearing masks. They don't have a million people. I think salons should be allowed to reopen. I think
they're starting to get the green light more and more. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because I don't think that's fair. So with regard to the thing, like, how do we find that Goldilocks place between being overly cautious and not cautious enough? Where do we find that?
I don't know, man. Like, that's a difficult thing because I feel like, listen, here's what I wanted to add to what you just said. If the science that we're being told says that as long as you wear a mask, you practice proper hygiene and you practice social distancing, which we can do all 3 of within the 4 walls of our gym, and we can do it very effectively. If that was a sound scientific protocol, why is me bringing in people to practice the science in a fitness setting automatically deemed dangerous? Why are we discounting the science and throwing the science out the window simply because I have a gym and it's not a grocery store, or it's not, the post office, or it's not any other facility that you can walk into right now as long as you wear a mask and you practice social distancing? Why is it that my fitness facility is being ostracized away from the science? That's the part that I don't understand. And to answer your question, how do we get to that Goldilocks position? I don't know. How do you get politics out of science? I don't even know how it got injected in the first place. I'm okay with following public health guidelines. But what's bothering me now is the fact that the state, and listen, when has the fitness industry ever followed state guidelines? I mean, we threw the food pyramid out freaking long time ago. You know what I'm saying?
Thank God.
There's that to consider.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, now you want to weigh in on the fitness industry? It's like, bitches, you got that shit wrong like 40 years ago.
You've been screwing things up for the last 100 years.
Yeah, you've been failing at that for a long time. Like shit.
Never follow government guidelines when it comes to health and wellness.
Yeah, but yet that's what we're forced into right now, right? We're following government guidelines in terms of how to operate safely. And listen, even the protocols that we're putting into, they're in addition to CDC guidelines. In addition to, we've superseded those guidelines because we know health better than the government does when it comes to certain things, right?
And because the health and well-being of our members is more important to us than it is to the government.
Exactly. So there's that. Okay. I don't know at which point politics got injected into science, but it's there and we have to deal with it. And I don't know how to find the Goldilocks approach at this point, because listen, if Governor Newsom comes out tomorrow and says, hey, gyms can reopen, it's the same virus. The same virus exists today that it's going to exist tomorrow, that's going to exist in December. So why does Governor Newsom all of a sudden have this magic kind of finger snap when it comes to the well-being of our community and the well-being of even our personal families when it comes to us being able to make income here? That's the part that I'm frustrated and kind of hanging up on, is that, and listen, it's not a political thing, right? Kind of going back to the video, this is a Goldilocks situation. Let's just get down to a middle ground, which is masks, social distancing, and personal hygiene. Like, can we just go there instead of really arguing whether or not somebody can open or not, or be closed or not, or somebody can operate or not, like, or if my kids can go to school or not? Like, Jesus, man, let the kids go to school. As long as you can keep it going that way. Like, how hard is it to put a sanitation station at the doorway of every classroom and shuttle kids so that they're not cramming into a hallway and go, okay, grades, let's go every other grade. You guys, shuffle out. You got 50% of the school going through the hallways instead of 100% of the school. Stagger it by 15 minutes, for Christ's sakes. How hard is that? Like stagger the classes.
So the accepted protocol, the generally accepted protocol, is masks, social distancing, hand washing, right?
Hygiene.
Here's the problem. We say follow the science. What do you do if people don't believe in science? So the problem is there are a lot of people who simply don't believe that that's accurate, and we don't have a central authority that is dictating national policy. And that is the problem. Because if the presidential administration had taken the position right off the bat of masks are mandatory, hand washing, social distancing, all of these things are required, and then enforced that, we may be in a different place. But when the responsibility for central command is abdicated and it is delegated out to 50 different governors, you're going to get 50 different policies. And some of those governors are not going to want to follow the science, and some of them are. So, and this is a political issue, and this does go to, and I am being political about this, but I've never known a president in my lifetime during a time of crisis to punt. I've never known that to happen. Whether you're talking about George W. Bush with 9/11, like him or dislike him, like his policies, dislike his policies, he stood in the pocket and he took the shots and he stood there out in front. Same can be said for every president, whether you liked him or not, in my lifetime. You know, now some of them lied and some of them did, you know, some of them got caught doing things that they shouldn't have done. But most of the time, whether you're talking about a natural disaster or a war or a conflict or something, they stood in the pocket and they took the heat. And this particular president didn't do that and abdicated responsibility, delegated it out to 50 different governors. There's no cohesive policy. And when that happened, it really did away with the possibility for there to be any sort of overriding, cohesive national policy that people can get around. That's a problem.
The Goldilocks. Yeah. You had the opportunity
to
actually create the Goldilocks situation and just mandate these 3 protocols, and then we would have been fine. Like,
whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, whether it was Obama, whether it's Jimmy Carter, if the person in charge was to say, we have this problem, here's what we're going to do. We're going to require universal mask wearing in public, period. We're going to require social distancing. And you can't really require sanitation, you know, washing the hands. That would have helped, because a lot of the places where that kind of thing isn't taking place happen to be places that are largely aligned politically with the administration's policies.
Can I just say something about social distancing? Because I feel like that's like one of the biggest wins for me, because for the longest time, every time I went to Starbucks for a coffee, there was always the guy that's
breathing hot on the back of your neck.
Yeah. Like, and I'm so happy that you have to have those dots now, where I'm like, why doesn't everybody want this? Because like, literally, I just hated that guy. And he was the guy that was on his phone too, as well. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to Starbucks and turn around and be like, you need to give me some space.
It's always space. The mouth breather too. It's like the mouth breather. And, you know, it's funny because I actually, in a sociology class that I took, they talk about different cultures have a different sense of distance. Like some cultures are like way far away, some are in the middle, and then you've got some that are just like face-to-face talkers like this. And if you don't culturally match up with that person, and like they're up in your face and that's the normal way for them to do it, and you're like going like this, they get offended. By the same token, if you're far away and you want to be close, that person gets offended. So it's really interesting. There are really cultural things here. But yeah, I totally agree, man. It's like, I don't really want that guy breathing on the back of my neck anyway.
I love that policy. That policy fits right in my wheelhouse, man.
I'm still really kind of gobsmacked by the like lack of physical contact thing, because though I'm like the guy that comes in hot with a hand. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'm this guy. I wind up, you know, or I bro hug, you know, and there's none of that. So when I see somebody, my inclination is to do that, just to take things fully off course. I wanted to circle back real quickly to something that's not particularly relevant to what we were talking about. You were talking about video games and being a 40-year-old video gamer. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you that there are studies that have been done that show that under certain circumstances, playing video games can be beneficial, stress reducing, and flow generating activities. You just have to be careful of competing against people that you don't know. And one of the things that you said, but then you contradicted yourself, is you said it's the way that you escape, but like there are challenges in learning. Well, if you play video games to escape, that's not necessarily a healthy thing. But if you play it because there's an inherent challenge and you can learn and like growth mindset, then it is. So, you know, you were kind of like laughing about like, I'm a 40-year-old gamer, but that's not a bad thing. Like that can actually be part of your health practice. But there are just a couple things to watch out for.
It has become part of it. Like it's funny you say that too, because Stacy made a comment not too long ago where she was just like, I see that it relaxes you. You know, like if I'm having a really hard, stressful day, I'll pick it up. And listen, my choices in games are really around problem solving. If I can find a game, and it's never, first of all, I don't even know how to get online and play with other people. So
yeah,
I don't play other people for that reason, but it's more in the problem solving kind of scenarios. If it's just a, you know, one of those games that you just go in there and just mow down people with an AK-47 type of thing, I'm not into those games, like those Call of Duty games and stuff, because there's no problem solving there. It's just get as many kills as you want. I really gravitate towards problem solving type games and things that I got to figure out and kind of systematically kind of go through and stuff. Those are the games that I really, really enjoy. Because I see the translation when it comes to how I go through my workday. You know, we've got this assignment system in our new scheduling system, and I tackle that. I can see how I tackle that in the same manner that I tackle assignments in a video game. Like I go systematically through it, because in video games you systematically go through it and you get awarded a trophy. You get a little trophy, you know, and that little ding comes up, and you're like,
and that's why you keep playing it.
I don't know what those trophies do.
It doesn't matter. It's like, yes.
Yeah, I don't know what they do, but I collect a lot of them.
Yeah.
But then I go into my work day and I do the same thing. I'm like, ding, 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 ding. So I feel like over the summer, since I've taken up a video game and stuff like that, I've actually been more efficient in my work when I do it, which is kind of funny. And I've noticed it. I've noticed how that does. So there's some validity and some truth to all those studies, you know, and yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's a newfound thing. I thought I would never pick up PlayStation again, but I have.
So, yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, there's research behind that. So flow producing, problem solving, engaged in your, I mean, that's actually beneficial. You'll laugh at this. My wife and I have gotten some jigsaw puzzles. That is like, that's the 50-year-old version of video games, right? Because it's like, you get lost in that too, because you're looking at it and you're trying to match things up. I did my first jigsaw puzzle with Melina, and I did it when we were up in Morro Bay. That's the first jigsaw puzzle I've done since I was 8. I mean, I haven't done one in years, and people talk about it. They're like, it's totally relaxing. I'm like, I need that. I need that. So I tried it. I'm like, this is kind of fun. So yeah, it is that kind of ties back to what we should probably have a longer discussion about at some point, which is really kind of just how our perception of health has changed and in what ways and what components that represents and what makes up health and how do we define health and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
For today, man, I don't know if we've solved anything, but it really just brings to the forefront the fact that when there are extreme reactions, whether it's extreme public policy reactions or extreme political reactions, extreme emotional reactions, and they're polarized, it's really hard to find that Goldilocks spot. And I think that we all have to realize that it's always somewhere in the middle. Like it's always somewhere in the middle. It might be skewed to this side, it might be skewed to this side, but it's not here or here, you know? It's somewhere in between. So
ever. I think that's, I mean, if anything, I think the progress for us that, and for me personally, that I made today in this discussion is realizing that there is a Goldilocks scenario, and that if we can have more and more discussions, I think that's how we make a difference with that. And just kind of get people to really understand that this is not a winning or losing thing. We're all losing right now. We're all losing. And unless we start to have this dialogue of really understanding risks, reward, and what we're actually, where we contribute to that risk reward scenario. Are we overestimating this, or are we underestimating this? And how is it that we can go meet in the middle? this thing is going to be a problem for a long time. And I hope that it resolves itself sooner. And listen, at the end of the day, I think we start to chip away at it one individual at a time. You know, we have a personal obligation to ask ourselves that question and not necessarily point the finger and be like, well, what do you think about this situation? No. What do you think about the situation? And what is it that you're doing that's contributing to this polarized discussion, whether you're on the right or you're left? It really doesn't matter. What's your contribution to it? And ask yourself, is that the right thing to do? Are you coming from a scientific standpoint, or are you just trying to win the conversation? That's
critical
really
thinking.
Comes down to.
It's critical thinking. You've got to employ. That's a really, really good point about, wanting to win, because it's a natural human characteristic. I get that. I've caught myself many times, and many times recently, in that position of wanting to win and going, wait a minute, dude, wait a minute. Critical thinking. We all need to stop and ask ourselves, does this make sense? What actually sounds right? Not what team do I play for, but what actually feels right based upon my inspection of it. Not what I've been told to inspect, but based on my inspection of that. Because listen, this is just another example of how go big or go home doesn't work. And that's like an American addiction. It's go big or go home. Is if we go to baseball games for home runs. Nobody gives a shit about bunts. It's our mentality, right? Yeah. It's like nobody wants to watch the football team that's like 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It's 60-yard passes, 55-yard, and I get it. I mean, I feel the same way. But this isn't about go big, meaning lock everything down, or open everything up rather. Go big would be the equivalent of open everything back up, and then go home would be close everything down. It's just another example of how the American mentality of go big or go home doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, cool, man.
Absolutely.
All right, brother. Good talk.
That was a great talk, man. I really enjoyed that one. that one. But yeah, man, you take care, and I'm going to go enjoy myself right now at a beach. So
knock yourself out. Have fun.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you later. All right.
Bye.